There are questions that arrive quietly in a person's life, not with drama or urgency, but with the steady gravity of something that has been waiting for years. One evening, you sit alone after a long day, the light in the room growing dim, the noise of the world finally soft enough for you to hear your own thoughts, and without planning it, you find yourself asking something that feels older than all your experiences. What is good and what is evil? We see people debating this on the surface of social life, speaking loudly about right and wrong. But when the noise fades, we are left with something far more intimate. Because good and evil do not only live in moral systems or cultural traditions, they live in the small moments when we decide whether to tighten or soften, whether to see clearly or turn away, whether to choose fear or choose truth. If you close your eyes, you may remember a moment from early childhood. Some scene that stayed with you not because of what happened, but because you felt the difference between a gesture that opened your heart and a gesture that made it shrink. Perhaps someone held your hand in a gentle way, and without anyone teaching you, you felt something that you would later call kindness. Or perhaps someone spoke to you in a way that made your whole body feel small, and you recognized something cold that you would later name cruelty. Even before we learned language, we knew that goodness brings a sense of spaciousness, and evil brings a tightening of the mind. Buddhist texts describe this with extraordinary simplicity. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha used the words kusala and akusala. But these terms did not mean good and evil, as in moral reward and punishment. They meant wholesome and unwholesome, beneficial and harmful to the unfolding of the mind. A kusala mind is free of greed, free of hatred, free of delusion, and an akusala mind carries these three poisons within it. The scriptures are pointing not to a list of commandments, but to the inner climate from which a choice is made. Imagine standing on a quiet street just after rainfall. The scent of wet earth rises softly. The pavement reflects the evening light, and for a moment, everything feels still. You see an elderly person struggling to step over a shallow puddle, and something inside you moves. That movement is not logic, not calculation, not fear of judgment. It is a quiet impulse that opens, a wish to ease another person's difficulty. This is kusala. Now imagine the same scene, but you are in a rush, your mind filled with irritation from something that happened earlier in the day, your breath shallow, your chest tight. You see the person, but instead of softness, you feel impatience, a subtle voice saying that their struggle is an obstacle in your path. This is akusala. The action may look small from the outside, yet the inner difference is deep. Good and evil do not begin with what the world sees. They begin in the quiet movements of the heart. In the Sanskrit tradition, the word papa was used to describe actions that darken the mind, while punya was used for actions that purify it. These words appear throughout the early sutras, and even though their original meanings are often lost in translation, their essence remains clear. Goodness is that which lifts the mind toward clarity. Evil is that which sinks the mind into confusion. This framing is powerful because it shifts the question from external judgment to inner transformation. Instead of asking whether something fits a rule, we ask whether it frees the mind or binds it. A person can follow all the rules of society and still carry an unwholesome heart. Someone can refrain from obvious wrongdoing, yet live in a constant state of resentment, fear, or greed, and such a mind, according to the Buddha, does not produce true goodness. Conversely, a person might not have perfect behavior by worldly standards, yet their heart is gentle, open, and sincerely wishing to cause no harm, and this is far closer to kusala. To understand this more deeply, imagine another simple scene. You are walking into your home after a tiring day, your mind heavy with concerns, your body craving rest. A family member speaks to you with an edge in their voice. In that moment, you feel a sharp contraction, the wish to snap back, the desire to let your irritation discharge into the world. You may not say the words. You may hold back through discipline. Yet the inner tightening itself is already akusala, for it is rooted in aversion. But if in that same moment you breathe, feel the ground beneath your feet, and recognize the discomfort in your own chest without being overrun by it, you create space. That space is kusala. Good and evil are never abstractions. They live inside the small decisions that shape the way we meet life. Modern neuroscience offers a perspective that gently supports this insight. Researchers studying moral decision-making have found that the brain's emotional centers begin responding long before conscious reasoning appears. This suggests that what we traditionally call moral choices begin as subtle movements of feeling that arise from the deeper layers of the mind. While this research is technical, its implication echoes what the Buddha observed through direct insight. The quality of the mind in the moment of intention determines whether an action will lead toward clarity or toward suffering. There is a teaching from the Dhammapada that says, "Mind is the forerunner of all states. Mind is chief. Mind shapes the world." This ancient verse does not lecture or threaten. It simply reveals that the world we inhabit is always colored by the nature of our own mind. To understand good and evil in this way is to realize that they are not forces outside us. They are movements within consciousness. There is a moment that occurs in almost every human life. You are faced with a decision that looks outwardly simple, yet you feel the weight of your entire inner pattern pressing into it. For example, a person might ask you for forgiveness. The rational part of you may insist that giving them another chance is foolish. The defensive part of you clenches, drawing lines to protect your pride. But beneath these layers, there is a place inside you that knows the truth of your own tenderness. If you listen to that place, you may not always choose to reconcile, yet you will act from clarity rather than from fear. That clarity is kusala. Goodness does not always mean sweetness, and evil does not always look loud. Sometimes goodness is a quiet boundary. Sometimes evil is the numbing of empathy. Consider another moment. You encounter someone who has done harm, and your mind immediately fills with a heavy taste of condemnation. You feel justified, even righteous. Yet beneath that righteousness, there is a tightening that resembles the very thing you dislike in them. The Buddha often spoke of this as a mirror. When we meet someone else's delusion with our own delusion, even if our opinion is correct, the moment is still akusala. But when we meet their delusion with clarity, firmness if needed, and freedom from hatred, the moment becomes kusala. This is why Buddhist ethics focus on intention, or satana in Pali. Intention is the seed that determines the entire fruit of an action. There is a story that practitioners have shared for centuries. A monk was sweeping the temple courtyard at dusk. The air was cool and fragrant, and he felt peaceful. As he swept, he accidentally stepped on an insect. He felt a moment of sorrow, but his mind remained still, for he had no intention to harm. Another monk passed by and criticized him. His voice sharp, his mind filled with judgment. Although he caused no physical harm, his heart was contracted, and his intention carried aversion. In this story, the first monk acted with kusala intention despite the accident, and the second monk acted with akusala intention despite the absence of physical harm. This story teaches something profound. Good and evil are not determined by outcome, but by the quality of the heart that moves us. Modern psychology also observes this. Studies show that aggressive behavior is often fueled not by desire to dominate, but by unresolved fear or unrecognized pain. People hurt others because they are internally destabilized, and not because they consciously wish to spread suffering. This does not excuse their actions, but it reveals the root. And once we see the root, the question of good and evil becomes less about punishment and more about understanding the conditions that give rise to each. There is a passage in the early teachings that says, "When the mind is clouded, the world is clouded. When the mind is spacious, the world is spacious." This is not a metaphor. It is a description of direct experience. Imagine waking up one morning with a heavy mood. Nothing in the world has changed, but everything feels gray. You walk through the same rooms, yet they seem unfamiliar. You talk to the same people, yet their voices sound distant. On another morning, you wake up with a clear mind. The same rooms feel warm. The same faces look kind. This simple shift shows that good and evil are not just social forces. They are states of consciousness. To deepen this understanding, picture this. You are walking beside a river just before sunset. The water reflects the dying light, and the sound of the current calms your breath. Ahead of you is someone you know, someone with whom you have experienced conflict. As you approach, you feel the memory of old tension rising, the subtle impulse to guard yourself. But then the wind shifts, and for a moment you see them not as an opponent, but as another person moving through the difficulty of being alive. Your chest softens. Your breath deepens. Something in you releases. That release is kusala. Sometimes goodness is simply the willingness to see clearly. Evil, when understood through this lens, is not a monstrous force hiding in dark corners. It is the moment the mind forgets its own clarity. It is the instant when fear becomes louder than truth. There is a teaching in Sanskrit that speaks of avidya, the mist that covers the mind. When avidya is present, a person sees enemies where there are none, threats where there is only uncertainty, and permanence where everything is impermanent. This misperception becomes the seed of harmful action. When avidya dissolves, even a wounded person begins to regain gentleness. A teacher once said, Evil is not something to defeat. Evil is something to understand. For once it is understood, its roots lose their strength. Good, in the same spirit, is not something to perform. It is something that naturally arises from a clear mind. Let us return to life itself for another scene. Imagine yourself sitting beside someone you love while they are in pain. You cannot fix their situation. Nothing you say will erase their sadness. Yet your presence becomes steady. Your breathing slows. Your awareness rests gently on them. This is kusala. Evil would be the impatience that whispers to you to withdraw, to numb, to reject, to protect your ego from discomfort. That is akusala. These moments appear everywhere in human life. A stranger cuts you off in traffic, and your body tenses. If you let the tension become a story about how people are selfish, that is akusala. If you let the tension dissolve into the space of breath, that is kusala. A friend succeeds at something you hope to achieve, and jealousy arises. If you let the jealousy become resentment, that is akusala. If you recognize it and let it soften, that is kusala. A difficult memory returns, uninvited, and your heart feels unstable. If you push it away or drown inside it, that is akusala. If you allow it to move through without letting it define you, that is kusala. Good and evil are not battles. They are choices about where we place our mind. The Buddha often used the image of a lamp. A single flame can illuminate a room that has been dark for years, because darkness is only the absence of light. In the same way, evil is not an entity, it is the absence of understanding. And goodness is the light of awareness, touching a moment. When we understand this, we begin to see that the world is not divided into good people and evil people. The world is a flowing field of conditions. When fear is present, actions become constricted. When clarity is present, actions become gentle. Every person carries both possibilities. A person who appears cruel may be acting from an inner landscape shaped by trauma. A person who appears calm may be holding themselves together through discipline. A person who appears selfish may be drowning in insecurity. A person who appears generous may be doing so from true freedom. Good and evil, when seen clearly, are movements of the heart. When you sit quietly and notice your own breath, you might begin to sense these movements inside yourself. There is the mind that contracts, the mind that blames, the mind that fears. And there is the mind that releases, the mind that understands, the mind that remains steady. The more familiar you become with these inner shifts, the more you will see goodness and harm not as cosmic forces, but as simple realities unfolding moment by moment in consciousness. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a forest path. The air is cool, the light gentle, the world quiet. You take a step, and the leaves beneath your feet release a faint sound, as if the earth is acknowledging your presence. In that moment, you feel the truth that you are not separate from anything. This recognition is kusala. Now imagine walking the same path with a mind filled with anger. Everything feels hostile. Even the sound of the leaves irritates you. This is akusala. The world has not changed. Only the mind has changed. In the end, to ask what is good and what is evil is to ask what kind of mind we wish to cultivate. Goodness is not a performance. It is the gentle alignment of intention with clarity. Evil is not a curse. It is the moment the mind forgets its own nature. If one day you sit quietly and feel into the center of your chest, you may notice that goodness feels like breath moving freely, and evil feels like breath trapped inside a tight space. Goodness is the expansion that comes from seeing things as they are. Evil is the contraction that comes from refusing to see. Goodness is clarity. Evil is confusion. Goodness is freedom. Evil is fear.